Hi, I'm Tim Constantine, and from Manchester, New Hampshire, this is the Capitol Hill Show. Donald Trump spent much of his life building a business empire. His name was his brand. His name appeared on luxury hotels, luxury apartments, on casinos, even on neckties and golf courses. Then, in 2015, Mr. Trump announced he intended to run for President of the United States.
I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
To the surprise of many, he beat Hillary Clinton. And in January of 2017, Donald J. Trump was sworn in as the 45th President of the United States.
We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people.
Trump oversaw a solid economy and had to face the challenge of a worldwide pandemic, but much of it was overwhelmed and overshadowed by controversy. Allegations of colluding with Russia turned out not to be true. Impeachment over a phone call with the president of Ukraine, a call the accuser wasn't even present for. After all of it, Donald Trump evoked one of two reactions. People loved him or they loathed him. In 2020, Donald Trump, running for re-election, got more votes than he had in 2016, but less than Joe Biden. Donald Trump is the presumptive GOP nominee for 2024, dispatching Republican rivals in the primary process quite easily. The bigger challenge has been fighting the courts. Trump has court battles in 4 jurisdictions at 3 levels of government, all coincidentally coming to a head in this election year.
Trying to figure out Donald Trump is no small thing. What motivates him? Where does he go from here? I sat down with his national press secretary, Caroline Levitt, to try to find out. Caroline, thanks for joining us on the Capitol Hill Show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going.
Sure.
Communicating a message for a national political campaign is challenging enough as it is, but you've had added distractions and explain to me the added component with the trials, with the personal attacks, with all that goes on. How does that change what you do in messaging?
Well, you have to walk and chew gum at the same time. And we've been fighting really a two-front battle, right? With the lawfare that President Trump has been facing, the unprecedented cases that we've been involved with as a campaign, while we're also simultaneously relaying our message to the American voter. And I think it goes hand in hand. President Trump is our leader. He's our greatest messenger, and I take the cues from him. And so he has every single day gone out to the American public, whether it be in his own statements through his Truth Social account, on his own interviews that he frequently engages in, or on the campaign trail at rallies and events, talking about the weaponization of our justice system against him, but also talking about his vision for America to make this country great again, to rebuild our economy, rebuild our military, secure our southern border, restore peace around this world, and to build on the accomplishments of his first term as president.
You know, with news now being 24/7, it's just, you can't escape news. I think people forget that President Trump and President Biden are real people. They're not just characters in some sort of entertainment play for us. How has the trial and all the distractions and the personal attacks impacted the president on a personal level?
It has been remarkable to watch President Trump firsthand fight against this weaponization of our justice system against him. I was in court in New York with President Trump almost every single day. And I think any other human being on the face of this planet would have folded like a deck of cards in the face of the opposition that he is facing. He is quite literally putting his freedom and his life on the line to run for president. This is a man who doesn't have to be doing this. He hasn't spent a career in public service like Joe Biden has. He's a billionaire. He has a very successful real estate company. He has a great family, great children who he's very close to. But he chose to step into the political arena again, and he chooses to do that day in and day out. And I can say, in all seriousness, he has never been more resolute in his determination to fight for this country. And every time he gets punched, he punched back harder. Now, we were in that courtroom when the verdict was read, the word guilty 34 times in a row. Anyone else would have left that courtroom feeling very defeated, not President Trump. He looked at us and said, I'm going straight to the cameras and I'm going to tell the people we're going to continue to fight. And that's exactly what he did. And that's a moment I will personally remember forever.
His personality can be overwhelming to some people. He is very direct. He is very clear. Who on the team can sit down with him and say, whoa, wait, I think we ought to just reel it in a little bit on this one. Who is he most comfortable with having those conversations?
Well, I think a misconception about President Trump is frankly what you just said. He is actually a great listener, and he seeks advice from everyone in the room around him, not only his senior staff and his aides on the campaign, but even Secret Service that surround us every day. His body man, for instance, even the pilot on our flight. He is always asking for the perspective of those around him that are in the room because he wants feedback from real Americans. He wants to know how decisions will play out, what certain people think of them based on their own worldview and perspective. And it's fascinating to watch. And I think that's why he's such a great leader, because he asks questions of others and he listens and he takes that feedback and then makes ultimately the right decision that he feels is best.
There was some question as to whether or not there would even be presidential debates this year, but there will be. At the end of June will be the first debate. But the rules are set that there will be no audience, no live audience. The microphones will be cut off at the time that the other person is speaking. And it's going to be on a network that has not traditionally been particularly friendly to President Trump. So what can we expect from him in that debate?
We very much look forward to the debate in June and also the debate in September. We've actually called on the Biden campaign to agree to more debates. That's how excited we are about this opportunity for President Trump to stand on a debate stage and to contrast his record with Joe Biden. President Trump has a tremendous record of success to stand on. He oversaw the lowest unemployment rates in history, a booming economy. He was the first president in the modern era not to enter the United States into new wars. All of that has changed in the last 4 years under Joe Biden's presidency. Joe Biden is weak. He is dishonest. His policies have been incompetent. And more than 70% of Americans agree with that. They see this country moving in the wrong direction. President Trump is going to talk about how we can get this country moving in the right direction.
Joe Biden has made it clear he does not think Bobby Kennedy Jr. should participate in these debates. If Kennedy meets the criteria for both polling percentage and appearing on enough ballots, should he be allowed to participate in the debates?
President Trump has said that he has no issue with RFK Jr. participating in these debates. President Trump has said repeatedly he will debate Joe Biden anytime, anywhere, any place, even if that means RFK Jr. is on that stage. With that said, RFK Jr. is not polling very well, and I think it's because many Americans realize how radical and far left he is. This is a man who called the NRA a terrorist group. RFK Jr. believes in implementing a national federal smart grid that would control our electricity and water supply in this country. That's communism, not capitalism. Voters are realizing where RFK Jr. stands on the issues, and it's actually on many to the left of Joe Biden, and that is why Joe Biden does not want RFK Jr. on that debate stage, because ultimately he hurts the Biden campaign a heck of a lot more than he hurts ours.
President Trump spent 4 years in the White House, and Joe Biden has spent almost 4 years in the White House. So let's run through a little checklist. I'll throw out a topic, and what we did in elementary school was compare and contrast.
Yes.
So let's talk about the economy. Compare and contrast the economy between the two.
Very easy. Look, In President Trump's economy, Americans had more money in their pocketbooks at the end of a hard-working week than they do now in Joe Biden's economy. President Trump created the lowest unemployment rate for all Americans, Hispanic Americans, Black Americans, Americans with a college degree, without a college degree. We're all contributing to our workforce. We had record low mortgage rates under President Trump, 2.65%. Today, they are nearing 10%. The idea of purchasing a home, living the American dream is very unattainable right now for voters across the country, especially young people. And that is why you see young voters are moving towards President Trump in a way that we've never seen towards any Republican candidate in history, because young people want a chance at that American dream. And it's not realistic in Joe Biden's economy and in his America. You look at not only the unemployment rate, interest rates, and mortgage rates, but also the cost of living. Wages were surpassing inflation. Inflation was a word in Donald Trump's economy that we never even discussed because it wasn't a problem. Today in Joe Biden's America, prices are still 20% higher than they were under President Trump's leadership. And what's Joe Biden wanting to do about it? Raise our taxes. He has promised to sign the largest tax increase in American history if he is elected for another 4 years. He wants to take away more hard-earned dollars from the American public when they're already struggling to pay for rent, for groceries, for gas. President Trump is a businessman. He has a proven record on the economy. Voters can trust him to not only cut their taxes, but to put more money back into their pocketbooks by reducing this crippling inflation.
One of the things you talked about there was jobs, and there was a report just came out this past week that more than half of the new jobs being created are going to immigrants. Let's talk about the border. Let's compare and contrast the border under President Trump and under President Biden.
In fact, all new jobs under Joe Biden in the last month went to foreign-born people, not native-born Americans. Every single one. That is a crisis. Joe Biden has allowed an invasion of our country. More than 10 million illegal people that we know about, I would bet the number is a lot higher than that, from countries all over this world. These are not people that are fleeing violence and persecution in Latin America. These are criminals that are coming from Venezuela, Russia, Korea, South Korea, maybe even North Korea, China, countries around the world that are not very fond of the United States of America. And they are being mass released into this country, thousands by the day, and the American taxpayer is funding it. We are paying for people from all over this world to have a brand new life here in our country. They are crumbling the infrastructure, and especially in inner cities, Democrat-run sanctuary cities. You walk down the streets of New York and you see them camping out outside of hotels. We are subsidizing their transportation, their food, their housing, and many of them are criminals. There have been heinous acts of violence against American citizens at the hands of illegal people who should never be here in the first place. I will never forget being in Georgia, backstage before President Trump's rally, when he embraced the grieving mourning mother of Laken Riley, who lost her beautiful daughter at the hands of an illegal animal who was arrested 5 months prior in New York for injuring a child and was released on bail, and then he killed Laken Riley. She should be alive today. And Joe Biden has done nothing in the wake of her death or the death of thousands of other Americans to shut down the border. And it's a crisis, not only an immigration crisis, but a humanitarian crisis. There's been more than 80,000 children that have been gone missing, completely lost. Our federal government has no idea where they are. One could bet that many of them have been sold into sex trafficking and slavery in this country. And Joe Biden has no plans to stop it. He recently announced an executive order that's only going to facilitate the more speedy entry of illegal immigrants into the country.
What could or should or was done differently that stems that tide?
So much was different. In fact, it's Secretary Mayorkas that bragged about how there are so many Trump-era policies that Joe Biden erased, they can't even count them all. Those are his words, not mine. On day one, Joe Biden made it a point to scrap Remain in Mexico, which was a very effective policy that President Trump negotiated. Not everyone could do that.
And explain to people what Remain in Mexico was.
President Trump brought the leader of Mexico to the table, and he said, when migrants are coming through your country to come to ours, they are going to stay in their home country while they wait for our country to approve of them coming here. Joe Biden did away with that. So now they're staying in our homeland and being released with a court date that's 3 or 4 years later. And we're actually supposed to believe they're going to show up for that. Some do, most don't. And so they're given a free ticket into this country, whereas they should be waiting in their home country to seek legal, lawful entry and or asylum. And one more point is Joe Biden ended the construction of President Trump's border wall. President Trump got more than 500 miles of that wall done. Where the wall was built, there was an 87% decrease in illegal crossings. We know the wall works. It is effective. Joe Biden stopped it, even though the American taxpayer already paid for the resources. Now they've been rotting away at the southern border, and our country has suffered an invasion as a result.
Let's do one more compare and contrast. Let's talk about international affairs, just world affairs. What's the difference between 4 years of President Trump and nearly 4 years of President Biden?
Peace versus chaos. Those are the two words that describe President Trump's leadership on the world stage. He ushered in an era of peace in 4 years that we have not seen in decades because he led through a position of strength. He used the leverage of the United States of America to demand peace, to deter our adversaries. Under Joe Biden, the world views him as a weak person. He's been wrong in every foreign policy decision he's ever made, dating back to when he was a senator from the state of Delaware. It's because of Joe Biden's weakness and his incompetent policies that Russia invaded Ukraine, that Iranian-backed terrorists in the Middle East launched the brutal attack on October the 7th on Israel. President Biden undid many of the sanctions on the Iranian regime that made them weak and broke under President Trump's administration, and therefore they were emboldened. So now we are in the midst of a war in the Middle East. War continues to rage in Ukraine. Joe Biden's only option is to continue making the American public write blank checks to these countries. And we are on the brink of a World War III. And I think that's a very plausible possibility if Joe Biden is given another 4 years as commander-in-chief.
There is lots of speculation about who Mr. Trump will choose as his vice president. What goes into that selection process?
There's a lot of great options on the table. The Republican Party has a very deep bench of great people, great leaders. Certainly any one of them would be much better than our current vice president, Kamala Harris. President Trump himself has said, though, the best quality he's looking for is someone who will make a great president for our nation to lead 8 years after his tremendous next 4 years in office. It's a decision only he can make. He will do that very soon, and the American people will hear directly from him when he does.
Now, he obviously knows each of the senators, members of Congress, governors that he is considering. Are there, what's the vetting process? How do they go through? If he's thinking, you know what, these three people are really great, is there a final sifting out process just to make sure that that's the right choice?
Well, I won't get into any internal discussions or procedures on that front. What I will say is that ultimately it's in President Trump's hands. And I can tell you he will make the best decision based on who he thinks will serve his ticket and help him win on November the 5th. And also serve our country very well.
All right, just between you and me, who's it going to be? In 2016, when he ran against Hillary Clinton, the polls, the vast majority of the polls, were wildly wrong. Everyone had, matter of fact, I have a great photograph of Hillary Clinton signing a pre-printed Newsweek magazine that said Madam President, and she was autographing it and handing it out. And of course, she never actually became Madam President.
Thank God.
But those polls were just way, way off. So how much stock do you put in the polls now? There are many polls that show President Trump leading President Biden in swing states. Do you believe it?
Based on the polling, President Trump has never been in a stronger position to win. Public polling suggests that. Our internal polling suggests that. He's winning in every single battleground state. He's leading with independents by double digits. He's winning Hispanic Americans. He is picking up a historic margin of the black vote that no Republican has ever even come close to. And if that remains, he is going to be the next president of the United States. With that said, we don't take anything for granted. And President Trump works harder than any candidate, I would argue, that's ever run for president before. We are focused on picking up every single vote that we possibly can, not just securing our Republican base, which is completely and totally unified around President Trump at this point in the race, but also winning those independents and bringing on disillusioned Democrats to this movement that are frustrated with the Democrat Party's empty promises. And we've seen that working, especially in Democrat cities. President Trump held a rally in Deep Blue, New Jersey, pulled a crowd of more than 100,000. The Bronx, 25,000 people, a very diverse crowd. There's a real palpable momentum and shift taking place in our country right now. We not only see it in the polling, but we feel it with every single campaign stop that we go to.
In 2020, there was concern as to whether or not there had been any shenanigans during the balloting. Is the campaign itself and or the Republican Party taking steps just proactive, trying to make sure there are no questions at the end of the first week of November?
Absolutely. We have completely joined forces with the RNC in a historic way. We consider ourselves one team with the Republican National Committee, and we work with them every single day. And they have hired an entirely new election integrity division to focus on securing the ballot. First of all, getting out the vote and then securing the vote. And there are measures being taken in every single key battleground state across this country. The RNC has actually filed a plethora of lawsuits in states ahead of Election Day to ensure that these states are upholding their laws as best as we can ahead of the game. And then we've also recruited more than 100,000 volunteers already to be active poll watchers, ballot counters in the states where those are allowed.
Is the American media fair?
To President Trump?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I do this for a living. I work with these people every single day. And there are reporters in this country who are so-called journalists that write stories with a perception already baked in. They come to us after their story has already been written, just out of due diligence to ask for a comment, but they don't actually take the facts or the statistics that we give them. And we have a very biased media in this country, and it's a shame, because I think if we had a truly truthful media, there would be even millions more people that support President Trump. However, unfortunately, there's a mainstream media in this country that genuinely dislikes President Trump, and they push false narratives and perceptions. And it's incredibly frustrating to work in this world, to know the president personally, to know how much good he's done for this country, and to constantly see a media that berates him and lies about him.
You work side by side with him. What is the single biggest misconception about Donald Trump?
There's a lot of misconceptions about Donald Trump, but I think it goes back to one that the Biden campaign is pushing every day. They say that President Trump is going to be a threat to democracy. I can't even say that with a straight face. He's in this for himself. Those are complete lies. This is a man who works countless hours a day because he loves this country so very much. He loves the people of this country. If people could see what we do as his staff behind the scenes, the time that he takes to call grieving parents. He, for instance, went to the funeral of Officer Jonathan Diller, who was gunned down in New York. He makes phone calls like that to the grieving families all the time, without publicity, without fanfare. He does it because he loves people, he has compassion for people, and he genuinely wants to help them and make a difference.
We talked earlier, you were in court with him. He's had a plethora of legal issues, 4 different jurisdictions, 3 different levels of government, all challenging him this year. He went through 2 impeachments. He has never-ending personal attacks. Why does he do this? You mentioned he's a billionaire. He's got a family around him. He does not have to do this.
No.
Why does he?
He loves this country, and he loves the people of this country. And it fires him up to see the amount of support that this movement has gained. President Trump, this is not just a campaign. This is the greatest political movement that America has ever seen. Millions and millions of people across this country support President Trump because they feel heard by him. He speaks for the forgotten man and woman, regardless of race or religion or creed or what state you're from or how much money you make. He has been saying the same things for decades, by the way, before he even got into politics. But he speaks the truth. And a lot of times he speaks for people who are afraid to speak up for themselves. And that's really inspiring. His message is inspiring and it's hopeful. And when you go to a Trump rally, you feel that spirit. It's filled with like-minded individuals, patriots, who just love this country and are saddened and frustrated and many times angered by what they've seen take place in Joe Biden's America. They cannot afford to live, yet they're seeing illegal immigrants come here on a free ride. There's Americans who are fearful will be in World War III, and their sons and daughters are going to have to go fight in another foreign war. We talk to families all the time who are grieving their loved ones, whether it's because they've passed of a fentanyl overdose or they've been gunned down by an illegal immigrant criminal. And that's why President Trump is doing this, to stop the bloodshed and the chaos, to bring back peace and security, and to restore America as the greatest, most feared and respected country in this world.
Caroline Levitt, thanks very much.
Great. Thank you so much.